The most important piece on board, this piece is critical because the entire game depends on its safety. If you want to win your opponent, all that you need to do is, say as white, you need to capture its king. Checkmate, that's called. And on the other hand, black will also try to capture your king if you're playing white. So both the sides have the kings in this position, and let's understand how the king moves. It can move one square in any direction, to the left, to the right, up one step. This is the edge of the board, otherwise it could have moved backwards as well. It can go to the left and to the right diagonally. One square in any direction it can go. For example, let's say the king goes to e2. Let's say black brings it to e7. King goes to d2, d7, e3, e6, d4. Now let's try to understand one special condition for the kings. The kings cannot move to the common square. So between them, these are the common square. You cannot walk into it because they oppose each other. Both the kings cannot be on an adjacent square. It's not allowed. You cannot reach here. You cannot reach here. It's legally not allowed. So neither can he come closer. That's also not allowed. So both the kings cannot be on the adjacent squares, either diagonally or left, right, up, down. In any direction, they cannot be in adjacent squares. So that's something we need to keep in mind. All right. Let's see the next power of kings. There is one more thing as it comes to king that you should remember. The king, let's say, white plays b4. Now, what is happening? This pawn is attacking this pawn, this king, or it can also choose to go forward in the next move, provided black doesn't do anything to this pawn. Now, as you see, the king is under attack. Whenever the king is under attack, you cannot do any other move. Say, for example, you cannot, try pushing this pawn or try pushing this pawn. There are only three options that you have. Either you run away with the king to anywhere safe, avoid the attack. That's one thing that you can do. Or capture the piece that's attacking you. In this case, you can take it like this. Or let's say if there was some other piece that can come in between, since there are no squares in between, you cannot place any piece in between this to stop the attack. You cannot block an attack in this case, but otherwise you can also choose to block. So either you capture, or you move to the safe square, or you block. These are the three options you have with your king. Now let's say black captures. Now white captures back. Now the king is under attack. What can he do? And what should he do? Of course, in this case, he can take this pawn because there is no other pawns protecting it. Earlier, it was not possible to capture it like this because you cannot walk into an attack. That's not allowed because it's protected by this pawn. Right. So that's the second condition about king. When it is under attack, you cannot play any other move than protecting your king, either by eliminating the attack or blocking it or moving away. And finally, I introduce you to the special moves of the king. So there is a special move for the king. And before I talk about it, you should also know that this piece is called a rook. And let me quickly talk about it so that you understand how it moves. It can move straight in any direction, but here it cannot cross this one because it's your own pawn. You cannot, it's blocking you from moving. It can just move straight, either left, right, up, or down. So that's how it moves. Here, the legally allowed squares are 1, 2, 3. You can choose to move 3 square in any of these 3 squares. You can either go here, or go here, or go all the way to D1. So that's how it moves. I will talk additionally on this further, but let's focus on the king alone. The king has a special feature here called castling. So what is a castling? I said the king can move only 1 square in any direction. However, in the castling alone, it is allowed to move 2 squares, either to the left or to the right. And it can happen under certain conditions. The first condition is that the king should have never moved, and the king cannot be under attack, and the rooks should not have moved. Okay, so these are the 3 conditions. I have also made another video on this, and it's available. That link description also I will put it in the description section. You can watch that later. For now, I'll show you how the castling is done. You move 2 squares to the right, and the rook moves 2 squares to the left. Now this is called castling. You swap by moving your king 2 steps to the right and rook 2 steps to the left. This is called castling, because you are protecting your king behind these pawns like a castle. It shields from any sort of attack. So that's called a castling. This castling is called short side castling because the king moves only 2 squares and the rook also moves only 2 squares. There is one other way that you can castle, which is the king moving 2 squares to the left and the rook moving 3 squares to the right. This is called long side castling because the rook from this side travels a little extra space. So this is called a long side castling. Now, black can also, say for example, I castle this side. Black can also choose to castle this side, or he can also choose to castle this side. So both are perfectly fine. But if white castles this side, look at this rook looking at this square. Now black cannot castle this side. It's not allowed because you cannot cross the line of attack while castling. That's one thing you need to keep in mind. The only possible castling for black right now is to go the shorter side. And another part is, let's say white simply castled and black plays some random move like a6. Now rook comes and attacks. You cannot, it's a check. It's a check. Whenever the king is under attack, it's called a check. So what are the options? Can you eliminate this rook with any of your pieces? No, there is no piece to attack. You cannot block the check with any other pieces. So the only option that you have is to move your king. Maybe you move here. Now, black has lost the right to castle because he has moved his king. So these are the special features when it comes to rook, king. So I hope you got a fair understanding of how king moves and what are the special moves that it has, and how the kings cannot come close to each other. There has to be at least 1 square space between the opponent kings, so you cannot come to the adjacent squares. So that's something you need to remember about kings.